Good afternoon, and welcome to TCB Talks Women in Leadership. I'm Allison Kaplan, Editor-in-Chief of Twin Cities Business, and on behalf of my colleagues at the magazine and our partner, St. Catherine University, thank you for joining us today over the lunch hour. This is our 10th year presenting the Women in Leadership event and our second time hosting it virtually. While we're glad the virtual experience is allowing so many of you to join us who otherwise may not have had the opportunity, we miss seeing you in person. And we know that distance comes with its own set of challenges, particularly for women looking to grow their professional networks and connect with colleagues. Some of the things we're missing most about work right now, in a topic I know we'll be discussing today with our panelists. I'm mindful as well that our city is currently on pins and needles as we gather today, awaiting the verdict in the Chauvin trial, which will no doubt reverberate across the nation. It's a sad time, it's an emotional time, and it's a critical time that we talk about the role business and all of us as individuals can play in building connections, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Feel free to join the conversation. You can mingle in the chat if you're attending via Zoom or on YouTube, and you can start a conversation on social media using the hashtag TCBWomenLeaders. In a few minutes, you will hear from St. Kate's on the findings from their annual report on women in leadership. Following that will be a discussion and Q&A with our esteemed panel. Before we dig in, I'd like to welcome Shireen Luz to say a few words. Shireen is Senior Director of Human Resources for RBC Wealth Management, today's Platinum event sponsor. In addition to RBC, we have a number of sponsors supporting today's event, all of whom have a commitment to greater gender equality in the top ranks of their businesses. Let's take a moment to hear from everyone on why they chose to support women in leadership through videos made by our video production partner, Studio 120.
Hello, my name is Shireen Luz, and I'm Head of Human Resources for RBC Wealth Management, one of the sponsors of today's event. At RBC, we're committed to women's continued progress and equality, and we're proud to be part of this conversation today. As many of you know, for the first time in history, the U.S. is in a she-cession, an economic downturn where job and income losses are affecting women more than men. More than 11 million women have lost their jobs, and another 2.65 million have left the workforce since February of 2020, many of them to take care of children and e-learning or elderly parents. At RBC Wealth Management, we understand the impact these responsibilities can have on women's career trajectories. That's why we're committed to supporting women in the workforce so they can not only weather this storm, but continue to grow and thrive in their careers. With new benefits such as emergency school closure leave, caregiver leave, and enhanced mental health resources, we are doing what we can to knock down barriers that often keep women from reaching their full potential. We're also increasing pathways to leadership at our firm. Since 2017, the number of female branch and complex directors at RBC Wealth Management has doubled, and we plan to further increase that number this year. Enterprise-wide, 46% of leadership positions at RBC are held by women. And in 2020, women accounted for 51% of new hires and 52% of promotions. Despite these positive gains, we know we can do better. We can all do better. That's why events like these, where we can take an honest look at our progress or lack thereof, are important. Knowledge, after all, is power. So, thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to gain a little more knowledge on this very important topic. With that, let's hear from our fellow sponsors.
Supporting women and building future women leaders is a priority for us at PNC. We're supporting programs in the community for young girls to build confidence, foster decision-making skills, and gain leadership skills for our future workforce. PNC's executive leadership team continues to be increasingly diverse, with 4 of 11 members being women. We're focused on developing stronger talent pipelines, mentorship programs, training and leadership development tools, and better feedback systems that help us listen carefully to our employees' needs and monitor the quality of management that they're receiving. Pay equity also plays a critical role in creating an inclusive culture and attracting and retaining diverse talent so that we can better compete in the marketplace, which are key elements of our talent-focused culture.
Cargill best upholds its values of putting people first and doing the right thing by making diversity, equity, and inclusion a top business priority. It's truly the foundation of our culture. A focus of our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy includes our commitment to gender parity in leadership positions and championing women so that they can bring their whole selves to work. At Cargill, we are accelerating our commitment to gender parity by holding leaders accountable, minimizing bias in our job descriptions, developing, mentoring, and sponsoring talent, cultivating allyship, enhancing health and wellness benefits, and finally, offering a global flexible work policy. We look forward to the Women in Leadership event to hear about what other companies are doing to champion and develop their employees.
SALO is women-founded and women-led. Across our organization, women leaders are foundational to the continued growth and successes. We are honored to help shine a light on the success and achievement of women who are paving the way, and we're committed to addressing the ongoing need to increase opportunities to elevate women as leaders within the workplace. We know the contributions women provide and the sacrifices they make. We recognize the importance of continuing conversations like this to get more women in leadership roles. How do we do this? 1, be a good listener and advocate for equity. 2, be workplace advocates. 3, elevate women's contributions and celebrate them. 4, make sure your organization's policies are designed to empower women and their career growth. And 5, be your own advocate, believe in your abilities. The data shows that inclusive workplaces and diverse teams produce the best outcomes. Having women in leadership positions is indisputably good for business. It's also important from a representation standpoint, making sure young women have role models, examples, and mentors to which they can aspire.
Thank you all. We're grateful for your sponsorship and for the work you're doing. I'd also like to thank our corporate supporters. If this were a live event, you'd see these companies' logos on tables all around the room. It's quite a sight to visualize the positive impact you all make and how much space it actually takes up in a ballroom. By supporting this event, you help to empower, inspire, and create a larger platform for women leaders. Thank you to Avanade, Best Buy, Bridgewater Bank, Centerspace, Deluxe, Highway Credit Union, Lurie, Navigate Forward, Pentair, Taft Law, US Bank, and YWCA. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Becky Roloff. Becky is the president of St. Catherine University, presenting sponsor of today's virtual event. She'll introduce you to all the results of the Minnesota Census of Women in Corporate Leadership. This year's census was inserted in the April-May edition of Twin Cities Business. We also sent a digital version of the census ahead of time, but don't worry if you missed it. We'll send it again afterwards, along with a recording of today's webinar. Now, let's dig into the census. Welcome, Becky.
Hello, everyone. I'm Becky Roloff, president of St. Catherine University. It's a pleasure to be here with you again this year to celebrate women in leadership and continue our collective work to increase the number of women in leadership. For more than a decade, St. Catherine University School of Business has produced the Minnesota Census of Women in Corporate Leadership as an avenue to measure the number of women in executive leadership positions in public corporations. This research report also serves as a vital tool for holding us accountable for driving the change our organizations and world needs, women equitably represented in leadership positions. For the last decade, we have partnered with Twin Cities Business to share these findings and foster dialogue around women's leadership, because we have a deep and shared commitment to women in leadership. St. Catherine University directly contributes to this work through our mission of educating women to lead and influence, women who graduate with the knowledge, skills, and commitment to lead in an ethical and inclusive way that drives change. As the nation's largest private women's university, we take this responsibility seriously because we know firsthand through every student who enters our gates, the impact of women who are empowered to lead. They transform the world. A year of women leaders. This past year is proof of women's ability to lead transformation, the importance of women in leadership roles, and the impact their leadership has in their organizations, communities, and nations. In addition to a record 144 women, or 27%, in the 117th United States Congress, this past January brought the historic installation of Kamala Harris as the first woman to serve as Vice President of the United States, breaking down a barrier that has been held for far too long. In fact, it comes 73 years after the first woman, a St. Catherine University graduate, ran for the office of Vice President. Grace Holmes Carlson, class of 1929, ran as the Socialist Workers' Party vice presidential candidate in the 1948 presidential election with Farrell Dobbs as the presidential candidate. Last year also saw a record number of women at the helm as CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. As reported in May 2020, there were 37 women holding CEO positions, up from 33 the previous year. This is good news. Yet, women still only make up 7.4% of the leaders of the Fortune 500 list. And for BIPOC women, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, that sense of momentum slows even more. At St. Catherine University, we know that there is a wealth of BIPOC women leaders who have already proven their abilities to lead, and more still are joining them every year. We know this because we educate many of them. Our student body grows more diverse every year. This past fall, our College for Women noted more than half of our first-time, first-year students were BIPOC. Our university community has created a strategic plan to ensure the culture of St. Catherine remains rooted in the constructs of inclusive excellence, a term coined by the American Association of Colleges and Universities to describe how a community or institution's success is dependent on how well it values, engages, and includes the rich diversity of students, staff, faculty, administrators, and alumni constituents. As we teach here at St. Catherine, so too must Minnesota corporations do. It's time to leave behind conversations about what we can do better. We simply must do better. We need to move from talking about the issue to taking action, real, tangible action. The specifics of action will become clear as you hear from today's panel of smart, talented women who will be sharing their paths to leadership. They will also discuss ways to increase the number of women in executive offices and on corporate boards. I ask that you listen to them closely to understand the barriers, to recognize the opportunities, and turn what you learn here into actionable changes in your organizations. Each of us holds a responsibility to create an environment that increases the number of women in leadership wherever we can. Your organizational culture will thank you for it, and you will see the ROI in your bottom line. The time is now. The tides are shifting, and the momentum for change is gaining speed at a rapid pace. We have the opportunity to turn this trend from a novelty to a matter of fact, to make the idea of women equitably holding leadership positions as proof of success for business. It will only happen when we own the moment and create the space for women to lead the way. I would now like to introduce Dr. Rebecca Hawthorne, Professor Emerita at St. Catherine University. She will share the highlights of the 2020 Minnesota Census of Women in Corporate Leadership. She researches, writes, and speaks on the topic of women's leadership and also conducts workshops for international delegations of women leaders visiting through the United States State Department. Dr. Hawthorne is one of the co-founders of this annual report and has led this important research for the past 13 years. We are incredibly proud and grateful for her commitment to this influential research and are deeply appreciative of the path she has laid for this work to continue as she passes the reins to current faculty in the School of Business. Rebecca, thank you for your leadership and vision in establishing the Minnesota Census of Women in Corporate Leadership. I turn the stage over to you to present this year's findings.
"2020 may go down in history as an inflection point for women's advancement in corporate America. The global pandemic pushed 4 times more women than men out of the US workforce. Those most severely impacted included mothers, senior level women, and especially BIPOC, Black, Indigenous women of color, the group historically left behind. Bottom line, the staggering exodus of women at all management levels has disrupted workforce progress and threatens future advancement of women into corporate leadership. Decades of gender progress hang in the balance." The annual Minnesota Census of Women in Corporate Leadership research examines the status of women leaders in the state's largest public companies as of June 30th, in 2020, 6 months into the global pandemic. Despite the impact of the pandemic and a significant drop in total available board seats, Minnesota companies continued making progress toward gender parity on corporate boards, revealing ongoing company commitment to gender diversity. Please direct your attention to the 2 bars on the far right side of the graph, our 2020 results. Women directors held 24.8% of the available board positions in 2020, the highest percentage of Minnesota women corporate directors in 13 years, exceeding the national average of 22.6%. Women executive officers, designated in SEC filings as Section 16B officers, held just 22% of the available executive officer positions, a decrease of 0.7 percentage points from 2019, despite an increase in the total number of available executive leadership roles in Minnesota's 77 largest publicly held companies. Progress in advancing women into senior level executive officer roles has stalled. Achieving gender parity in corporate leadership requires diversifying both boardrooms and senior executive teams, not just one or the other. In 2020, 52 of Minnesota's 77 largest public companies had both women directors and women executive officers. Only 9 Minnesota companies qualified as 0-0 companies, those with no women in corporate leadership. As a whole, women made slow but steady advancements into corporate leadership in 2020. A closer examination, however, reveals significant strides for some, but not for others. Women's advancement into corporate leadership roles in Minnesota in 2020, as in the past, primarily benefited white women. BIPOC women, or women of color, secured only 4 of the 23 new women director positions, holding 3.9% of 618 total available board positions in Minnesota companies. The vast majority of Minnesota public companies, 76.6%, have no BIPOC women directors. In terms of executive leadership, only 8 of the 110 women executive officers across Minnesota public companies were BIPOC women in 2020, representing only 1.6% of all executive officers in Minnesota Census companies. BIPOC women comprise 20.3% of the US general population, but remain significantly underrepresented in the ranks of Minnesota corporate leadership. Research documents the greater challenges faced by BIPOC women, especially Black women in corporate America. The intersection of race, gender, and ethnicity shapes workplace experience and dictates leadership opportunities. Women of color face a more solitary leadership climb with less managerial support, slower promotions, less access to sponsorship and critical career opportunities. They find fewer role models in senior leadership and face more acute discrimination. In spite of these obstacles, more BIPOC women aspire to top executive roles than white women do, top executive roles that may serve as a prerequisite qualification for board candidacy. The global pandemic has severely disrupted the corporate pipeline, a pipeline that illustrates the disparate odds of women's advancement, both white and BIPOC, up the corporate ladder. BIPOC women have struggled disproportionately with stalled careers, increased financial insecurity through layoffs, furloughs, and workforce departures over the past year. Within companies, the first promotion to manager represents a key decision point, with women of color promoted at significantly lower rates than white women and white men. The percentages of white women and women leaders of color decrease at each subsequent level, with a select 3% of women of color reaching the C-suite. The pandemic has pushed more women, particularly women of color, than men out of the workforce. As a result, even fewer will ascend to senior levels of leadership. The corporate pipeline is broken. Focused intervention is necessary if companies want to achieve gender diversity in corporate leadership. Intervention in terms of workplace structures, policies, and culture to benefit those women, especially BIPOC women, left behind. Honor roll and special distinction companies serve as models of inclusive workplaces, attracting and retaining highly qualified women leaders. They provide the structural support and workplace culture necessary to assist all employees, both men and women, successfully advance in their careers. Despite the challenges of a global pandemic, these companies have walked the talk towards gender parity on their boards and executive leadership teams in 2020. Honor roll companies have both 20% or more women directors and 20% or more women executive officers. The number of honor roll companies dropped from 31 to 30 in 2020. Special distinction is awarded to companies with 30% or more women directors and 30% or more women executive officers. 30% represents the critical mass when gender diversity normalizes, enhancing corporate governance and performance. Increased innovation, improved decision-making, talent retention, effective risk management, strengthened social responsibility, and stronger financial performance are strongly and consistently correlated with gender diverse corporate leadership. In 2028, Minnesota companies reached this critical mass of 30% or more women on both boards and in executive office, a drop of 3 companies from 2019. Deluxe and Target deserve additional recognition for their longevity on the honor roll. Both companies have maintained honor roll status all 13 years of the Minnesota Census research. Despite director and executive officer turnover, both companies have retained diverse corporate leadership teams, a notable accomplishment. And now, we would like to acknowledge the 2020 honor roll and special distinction companies, an elite group of 30 Minnesota public companies that move Minnesota forward toward gender parity in corporate leadership. 3M, elite with special distinction status. Apogee Enterprises, Best Buy, Calix, Christopher and Banks with special distinction status. Deluxe, Donaldson, Ecolab, Electromed with special distinction status, General Mills, Graco, Hormel Foods, Insignia Systems with special distinction status, Investors Real Estate Trust with special distinction status, Nortech Systems, Nuvera Communications, Envent Electric with special distinction status, Ottertail, Pentair, Protolabs, Regis, Sleep Number with special distinction status, SBS Commerce, Sermotix, Target, Tenant, Toro, US Bancorp with special distinction status, and United Health Group. Congratulations to our 2020 honor roll and special distinction companies.
Thank you, Becky and Rebecca, and congratulations again to this year's honor roll companies. For those of you joining us today via Zoom, feel free to use the Q&A section on your screen to ask our panelists questions or weigh in during our webinar. We will get to all of your questions and comments, as many as we can, towards the end of the discussion. We also have quite a few people tuned in today on YouTube. Hi, everybody on YouTube. Feel free to comment there as well. We are monitoring and we'll do our best to get to all of your questions. Now, finally, I would love to get to our panelists. Let's welcome them to the screen. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Well, let me just introduce everybody and then we'll jump in. First up, I want to welcome Remi Kent. Remi is the Senior Vice President and Global Chief Marketing Officer for 3M, where she leads integrated marketing, media, e-commerce, consumer insights, and analytics globally. She's responsible for delivering profitable growth for the brands. She also serves as a board member for YWCA of Minneapolis and Mobile Marketing Association. Remi is also leading and participating in various actions to help dismantle racism in her work and community. I was lucky enough to be part of one of those efforts a few months back, and I'm hoping we'll talk a little more about that today. Thanks for being here, Remi. Next, I'd like to introduce Kristen Kimmell, Head of Advisor Recruiting and Field Marketing for RBC Wealth Management. Kristen leads the firm's efforts to invite the best talent in the industry to join RBC's financial advisor base. In her role, Kristen works closely with the RBC's Global Head of Diversity and Human Resources to recruit and retain diverse talent in both the advisor and corporate ranks. She's also the leader of the firm's push to cultivate a diverse and inclusive advisor force and elevate the role of women within the wealth management industry. A nearly 25-year veteran of RBC Wealth Management, Kristen is known for her out-of-the-box thinking and for her ability to bring teams together to accomplish big goals. Thanks for being here, Kristen. Leslie Lee is the Vice President of Digital Experience at Hormel Foods and brings more than 20 years of CPG and marketing experience to the role. Leslie leads the company's growing digital and e-commerce business strategy, which has seen significant growth in the last few years as more consumers look online for their favorite brands and products. She also oversees digital marketing, e-commerce operations, innovation, digital product management, and data analytics and insights for the company's portfolio of consumer-facing and food service brands. Welcome, Leslie. And last but certainly not least, we're delighted to have Terry Rasmussen, President and CEO of Thrivent. Terry has overall leadership responsibility for Thrivent, guiding the organization as it fulfills its promise to help people achieve financial clarity so they can live lives of meaning and gratitude. She's also a member of the Thrivent Board of Directors. Prior to her role as president and CEO, Terry was president of Thrivent's fraternal business after serving 10 years as the senior vice president, general counsel, and secretary. What a group. Thank you all for being here. Before we get into any of the heavy stuff, I wanted to just start with a little icebreaker. Want to ask all of you, some of you are at home right now, some at work, what is one new habit that you've developed since the onset of COVID-19 that you hope to carry on once this time is over? It can be personal or professional. What's one habit that jumps to mind? Terry, do you want to start?
I would love to start. And again, it's great to be here with everyone. And thanks, Allison, for that great introduction. And I feel honored to be a part of this esteemed panel. So one of the things that I decided a year ago, March, was I have this beautiful exercise room, and I was going to make sure that I got some exercise in every day. So every morning, you're going to see me at the treadmill pounding away, and I'm happy to say that habit has continued. Usually, with the best of intentions, it lasts about, maybe a couple of months, but I'm proud to say it's actually lasted now 13 months. And so it's a habit that I hope I can continue when we actually return to the office.
That's very impressive. And Terry, I hope I'm not oversharing here. I just have to mention, I love what we were saying when you and your husband built your house, you wanted an exercise room, he wanted an office. Who could have imagined 20 years later, pandemic, working from home? So where are you right now?
Well, I am now greeting you from my daughter's bedroom. So I was sharing with the team. Yes, it's true. 23 years ago, we built this house, and so my first week office from working remotely was the kitchen table, and it was I learned a couple of things. First, it was way too close to the refrigerator. And secondly, I could never actually be home. So we're empty nesters. First, I moved into my son's bedroom. And today I'm in my daughter's bedroom. And the good thing about that is I can, at the end of the day, walk out, shut the door, and I'm home. So, so yeah.
Good to set up those boundaries. Leslie, what about you? What's one new habit that you hope will carry on post-pandemic?
Yeah, so I'll build on Terry's habit in the sense that when in the beginning of the pandemic, I guess my habit was not actually a great one. It was eating a little bit too much. So just having the access to food and being at home all day, I probably ate a little bit more than I should. And so to counter that, I started exercising more. I used to always exercise, but then with the gyms closed, I was trying to figure out the best way to exercise. So I really got in the habit of using virtual exercise at home workouts. So being able to do more than just cardio, but also some weight lifting exercise and things like that have definitely stuck with me throughout the this pandemic and moving forward. So I would say, eating first, exercising second are the habits that I would put.
That's great. Remi, what about you?
I have to say that mine is using video. So my parents are in Atlanta, and of course I talk to them frequently, but we all have iPhones. We did not always use our video. So on the iPhone, it's FaceTime. Also with my girlfriends, we're Zooming and having happy hours. So that connection long distance, I think, has become a little bit more personal with the video, and I want to keep that going.
Yeah, that's great. So true. Kristen, what about you?
I wish I could say mine was exercise, but I have to say one of the things that I've been the most consistent, I've been intermittent on the exercise, but one of the things I've been the most consistent with throughout the last 15 months has really been reading. It just seemed like with work, there were always emails to be answered or presentations to be read or materials to be reviewed. And so I'd really gotten away from reading for enjoyment, and I picked that back up in the pandemic. And it's just been a really great escape for me and a little bit of a coping mechanism, and maybe even some self-care by taking some time to actually read for fun again.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing all the personal anecdotes. I want to talk a little bit about hybrid work and hear a little bit about what it's been like for each of you in your leadership roles, good, bad, what you're learning. But I also want to challenge you all to think back to the earlier days of your career. What if your entire career had been hybrid? Do you think you'd be where you are today? What would have been different, better, worse, as we kind of think about what this has been like for people who are coming up the ranks? So that's kind of a lot there. Let's talk hybrid now and thinking about the bigger picture. Remi, should we start with you?
Yes, I have actually really enjoyed hybrid in that I think that it has catapulted our culture by, several years in terms of flexibility. So that part I really appreciate and value. It's the fact that we can't go into the office is what's the challenge, right? So to have true flexibility, you would be working remotely, or you could choose to be in the office based on your needs. So I can't wait till we get to that, what I consider true flexibility of having both. I think that there are a lot of things that we're going to have to watch and be planful in as we exercise that flexibility. So will everyone take on that flexibility in the same way? Do we not perpetuate gender inequalities as a result of some people taking on the flexibility and others not? So it's a really critical point in time where I think we we found flexibility has won. Now, how do we make it work for everyone is the real question. And I think as leaders, we're going to have to be really thoughtful about that. And then your second question, would I be where I am if I was in a hybrid model? I think honestly, my answer would be no. And it's because I think in order to have that equality across a hybrid model, everyone needs to be in it. And so ultimately, I feel like a lot of the connections that I've made over, the water fountain or the lunchroom or being able to connect with people really personally has happened because I have been in the office. But I hope to change that. I think we have to change that. And so that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Great, great. Terry, what about you? What do you like about hybrid? What's been most challenging about leading your team and adapting and think back to your early days? Well, what if you'd been in this situation the whole way through?
Well, I think one of the challenges is, and Remi started to say this as well, is that establishing the personal connection. We've had several of our employees join us in this environment. In fact, we've had employees that we've never actually physically met, in person. And so, how do you establish that connection? So we're pretty intentional about that, making sure that we're spending time. It's not always work. I mean, how do you interject fun in the workplace? So we've done things like, and this is crazy, but bingo was a huge hit for us. We had 40 different bingo sessions with 80 to 100 people per session, and we conducted this bingo tournament where people could just kind of be themselves. We had people singing and dancing and just having fun, and that's a wonderful way to make a connection when so often you're not able to physically be together. The other benefit I would say that we've learned is we have two primary campuses. We have our Minneapolis Corporate Center, but we have our Operations Center in Appleton. And in that, there was, I think my Appleton colleagues would think that they probably weren't in the know, they weren't at the water cooler. And so this has been the great equalizer across multiple campuses. And so we're all on the screen, we're all the same size on the screen. But if I look back at my career and think about a hybrid model, I was really blessed to a certain extent because of the organizations that I worked with. There was a strong group of women. Becky Roloff is one of them. And we supported one another, and that support really did enable a flexible work environment. And so I remember frequently, if I had something going on with the kids and I really wanted to be there, my colleagues said, "Hey, we got this for you, you go." And helping and achieving that balance was really important. So as I think about this model, I mean, I would like to think that I've been the beneficiary of it in my past. And so, yes, I would be in this role today because of it. And so I think it takes some work, but it does work.
That's great. Leslie, are you liking hybrid work? How has it changed things? How do you run your team? And what are your thoughts about, kind of the pros and cons?
Yeah, so I absolutely like the hybrid work, and I too like the flexibility of it. So the ability to be able to work from home or work in the office. And as you see, I'm actually in the office today. And so I have that flexibility to come in the office or stay at home when I need to stay at home. And so that's been very beneficial as I recently was moving from one location to the other. And so it was helpful to be able to be home in those times, to be able to have the movers move while being able to still work. And so that's definitely been a benefit. I would also say, from what Terry said too, I think this idea has been a great equalizer in the sense that we've been able to have many more in-person meetings because of technology, right? And because of Zoom. And so we've been able to bring more people to the table, been able to have, a lot more conversations that hear different perspectives and opinions that traditionally, if we were in the corporate office, all in the corporate office, it would only be set to a certain group that's in that office. So we've been able to have many of our locations outside of our corporate office participate in meetings and discussions overall. And then on the fun side of things, our company has done a tremendous job in helping to drive that engagement and that fun as well. And we actually had concert series that over the summer, the course of the summer, where we had musicians come and play. And we've also had programs. We did a graduate program for high school students who had graduated in 2020. We did a whole program highlighting those students, and then had a concert as a part of that. So there's been a lot of different ways that we've been able to interject and kind of keep the community together while we're in this situation moving forward. But I definitely think that what we are learning from how we're approaching this today will also carry us forward in a better place, and being able to have this hybrid flexible model moving forward.
Right, right. Kristen, can you hear us okay?
I can, and I've just been notified my video seems to be frozen.
Well, you look pretty though in it, so that's the good news. So we'll try to get that fixed. But in the meantime, I would love to hear your perspective too. I loved that we had a conversation about what it was like earlier in your career back in the days of rushing to pick up kids at preschool. When you think about that and what the attitude was then, do you feel like attitudes about hybrid work have changed dramatically, and are they here to stay?
Yeah, I hope they're here to stay, and it has changed dramatically. And I really think that one of the true benefits of this hybrid environment and people working from home, I really think has been about recognizing people as their whole selves, recognizing some people have children obligations, some people have health commitments or appointments that they need to get to, and having a little bit more of a tolerance for that, I think is one of the true benefits that we're seeing in organizations today that I really am hoping will carry forward into kind of the future work environment, as Remi mentioned, as we get back to what does this look like when we get people back in the offices. So I think that's really, truly where we'll see the biggest strength. That was very different. I remember racing, as you said, racing off at 4 o'clock every single day to catch a bus to meet my childcare commitments, and being told that likely would have some limitations on my future career. And now seeing that with this environment and allowing people some of that flexibility, whether it's movers coming into your home or being able to pick up your kids from school and then logging back on, is really going to allow more people to bring their entire selves into the workforce.
Right. Well, as you heard in the census report, more than 4 million payroll jobs have been lost by women since the beginning of the pandemic. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 32% of women ages 25 to 44 say childcare was the #1 reason. What are your thoughts? Do you think businesses should be doing more to help women with childcare? And I say with parents, but we know that more often the burden does fall to women. So should businesses be helping? Should the government be subsidizing? Any thoughts? Terry, do you want to start?
Well, I think, excuse me, childcare is really critical. And as a parent, it's hard to actually be at work if you don't think your children are being really well taken care of. So childcare is really important. And I also think, employers, it's also creating the flexibility. I was fortunate, my kids, they had great daycare, and we chose to put them in daycare. And so that if they were sick, I was home with them, or my husband was home with them. And we had great flexible employers that really helped us with that. They got rid of the guilt associated sometimes with that. And so it was always, I always felt really supported. And I think that's important, that employers, if we can actually just really support our employees, the parents, and so that they feel that they can be good parents and be really good at work.
Right. And I welcome you to answer this just, personally or professionally. Kristen, you might have some perspective as far as what a company can do. Does RBC have any plans or discussions about childcare? What could we do to make it easier for women?
One of the things thanks for asking. I think one of the things that I'm so proud of that RBC has done is the backup childcare. So I know childcare is very personal and it's different to everybody. And so it's hard to really for an organization to do a one size fits all. But we know one of the things, and Terry mentioned, right, when there's a sick child or another family member that has to be cared for, that's when the real crisis sets in. And I remember at times when I had young children, my husband and I have to alternate. Okay, I stay home today, you stay home tomorrow if the fever isn't done, and you kind of work through it that way. But RBC offers a backup childcare program, and I think that is something that just takes that stress out, right? So if there's an opportunity, I mean, certainly when your child is sick and at home and you need them, but if there is a reason that they can't go to school, they still had a fever and they haven't hit the 24-hour mark, to have that flexibility to use a backup childcare program, I think has been something that's been tremendous for the colleagues of RBC.
Great. There's a quote in our April-May cover story by Liz Fetter. I think more women would be interested in senior management roles if they were convinced that the hours, the stress, the demands, and the culture would not suffocate their lives outside of work. Does that ring true to anybody here? What would you tell a young woman starting out today? And is that what it's like to work in a corporate culture, especially at a Fortune 500? Remi, do you want to start?
I mean, I think this is an ongoing discussion, and none of us will probably ever provide the answers. But what I have seen happen for me in my career is that the smarter I get about my intentions in life and what I want to be to my son and what I want to be to my family and what I want to be at work, the clearer I am about what my end goals are, the more choiceful I become. So what I would tell a young woman is, I think it's important to be uber focused on the end in mind that you're after. Be really clear about what the big rocks are at work. I think sometimes we get very distracted by small, low impact activities, and maybe we're in activity, but we're not making impact. And so I would say, think about those things that are going to make impact. And for impact for me is what is going to drive the business growth, and get singularly focused on those, align with your manager, make sure that you have your manager's support to be singularly focused, and then go. And don't get distracted by the quagmire, if you will. And so I think that has been, I'm getting smarter and smarter at that as the years go. I'm not perfect, but I've definitely evolved, and it allows me to be true to myself at work and give my all 100%. But it also allows me to, go to my son's baseball game at 4 p.m. if I need to, because I'm super clear on what my big rocks are at work and with my family.
Yep, I like that, big rocks. Leslie, what about you? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I'd like to build on that because I think that is a very great point. And it's taken me to, over my career too, to understand and be able to make that balance. But what I would say is, to a young woman starting out is essentially like, you have to set your boundaries. You have to know what your non-negotiables are. What are the things that you absolutely need to show up for and want to show up for? And so once you understand that and have that and communicate that with your managers, with your teams, with everyone around you, so they understand those things as well. And then fundamentally, you have to deliver. So you have to show up, you have to do the job that you're meant to do. You have to be there and deliver the results. And so if you can deliver your results, you communicate to your team, but you know what your non-negotiables are, you'll be able to make that work with your manager and your teams moving forward.
Terry, Kristen, anything to add?
Maybe I'll build on that, and I'll share. My dad always told that we had 3 kids in our family, and my dad always said, find out what you love to do and do it, because you've got to do it a long time. And so fortunately, the 3 of us kids, we did find careers that we love. But the one thing that he also said that really struck with me all these years, and I share this freely with other colleagues, is make sure you're defining success for yourself. Don't let society define success for you. And so early on in my career, I was an associate at a law firm, and I think I was the first associate to actually interview partners to figure out if I even wanted to be a partner, because as a young lawyer, I was so conditioned, and of course you have to become a partner in a law firm. But really, when I started interviewing people, it wasn't for me. So make sure that you're defining what success is for you. Don't let society dictate it for you. And then have fun.
Great advice.
And Allison, if I could, I'd love to just add one point to it. I think sometimes, we've all heard that women have to be overqualified for the position. They have to check every box, right? And I think sometimes the idea of the stress, the idea of the demands are one more thing that we're putting on the checklist to rule ourselves out. And so I think Remi and Leslie and Cherry made fabulous points of defining what it is that you want, that definition, but also not using this as another reason to rule yourselves out of that opportunity like we do naturally if we don't fit that mandate 100%. And I think these are just qualifications that we're adding on as other reasons to rule ourselves out for those opportunities. If I could give myself younger advice, that's what it would be.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're all in leadership roles, obviously. No doubt you've had to make a lot of tough calls this year. What's worked for you? What's been most important as far as supporting your team, keeping work on track from a distance? Does something specific come to mind, or just sort of an approach that you've taken? What's worked for you? Terry?
Well, in our case, it's last year at this time, we were in the process of introducing our new brand. We were in the process of actually moving into a new building. And so if you can imagine, that really galvanized our workforce. And just the sheer challenge, we had floor captains going with their phones and videoing, on the floors, people's offices, to say, what do you want us to ship to your home? What do you want us to ship to the new building? And, we had this incredible brand that we launched, which really got everyone excited. For the first time, Thrivent actually did national advertising. And it was something that just really made people excited and proud. And as a result, we really came together as a team. And early on, we created two task forces. One to make sure that our employees, our workforce, had what they needed to have, and the other one was to make sure we could continue to serve our clients, because with the economic turmoil, our clients wanted to make sure that we could, continue to serve them. And because we brought these two groups together, it really created an energy in our workforce that, but for the pandemic, I'm not sure we had. So I think it was great. It's I say it's nothing like a good pandemic to get us really focused and really decide what matters. And our workforce was our number one priority, and we've come through this, I think, extraordinarily well. And our clients, because we were there in the recession of 2008 and 2009, their biggest question was, how can I give back? How can I make an impact in the community now? Because I feel like I have financial clarity, and yet I still want to give back to the local community. So it was a good thing.
Great. And you've got a lovely new building to get back to downtown, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I was going to say our employees are very excited. It's a stunning building, and I can't wait to welcome them back.
Right. Leslie, what about you? What's worked for you? An example or just a strategy to keeping the work flowing?
Yeah, so I would say absolutely what has worked is helping to keep the transparency with the team on with the beginning of the pandemic, we all were in this question, not knowing what was going on. So for me personally, having that transparency with my team. But I'll say that really started with our leadership team. So at Hormel Foods, our leadership team from day one came in and said, we will be transparent through this pandemic. We don't know all the answers. We don't have all the answers, but everything we know, we will communicate to our employees, and we will find ways to communicate that across all the employees. So whether it's our plant professionals or our office employees, making sure that that communication is clear and consistent across the board. I think that's been very important because it helps our employees to understand that not all the answers are solved and there's no pathway. We all know that there wasn't a path here we had to build our path as we were moving forward. And so coming from our leadership down on that and being very clear about where we were focused and where we needed to head, what we knew and what we didn't know, was definitely a really great way to manage through this pandemic.
That's great. Remi, you've launched brands, you've had to step up manufacturing on critical equipment. What's worked for you?
Well, I have to say, for everyone, I wish I could take credit on the manufacturing work. It is not mine to take. Some diligent people have really worked on our supply chain and manufacturing to really make sure, essential workers, frontline workers have the PPE that they need. And it took enormous sacrifice on their part and their families and themselves. And so I want to give credit where credit is due. And I'm just honored to be a part of that in helping to make prioritization choices where we can. But what we've really done that I feel it is working to the degree that it can in a pandemic is, I would say, we've been really focused, trying to simplify what we're asking our workforce to do and be clear and concise in that. We've been flexible. I would say that I've had more conversations about people's whole selves in this role, what their challenges are, allowing them the space to vent, to share what's happening with their families, and being really human. So showing some vulnerability, I think, has been really important for me and my team. There have been times that I've told them, I'm not okay, and it's okay for you not to be okay. And still presenting from the standpoint of leadership, the optimism that I have for the future, but also not being afraid to embrace the feelings of concern that we all have. And so that transparency, providing that psychological safety and forums for people to actually talk and dialogue, and that open door to me, I think has made a difference for my organization.
That's great. Kristen, do you want to add anything to that, just as far as your leadership strategies or techniques or things that have worked for you this year?
Yeah, I think I would just echo on a little bit more that vulnerability piece of that, being vulnerable, what's working, what isn't working. And I think one of the things too what's working is recognizing when things don't. Out of the gate early on, I felt I really needed to replace all of the FaceTime with video time. And quickly, everybody started to run into that Zoom burnout. So now giving people permission, and I love when I get on a meeting and there's somebody that says, today is a no camera day because that's what I need right now. So, kind of learning from that and being okay with learning and having those open, candid conversations and meeting people where they are.
Great, great. There was a time when big businesses really tried to avoid wading into political and social issues. That's gotten increasingly difficult in these divisive, challenging times. What stands out to each of you about how your company has responded to events of the past year, whether it's pandemic needs or equity and inclusion needs, race discussions? What stands out, and do you kind of have a feeling about where the role that businesses should play? Remi, I'd like to start with you because, as we were just saying, I mean, 3M has obviously been so front and center since the earliest days. You've had you've had a spotlight on you throughout this past year. You've made a lot of moves on the race and diversity side as well. What did, I mean, in your role as a marketing executive, is that how have you guided the company? What do you say as far as how much the company's voice should be heard?
Yeah, I think Mike Roman has done a stellar job in addressing the social justice and racial issues. And the company, I've been really proud to be a part of the company that has said that they will pledge $50 million over the course of 5 years to address racial disparities and gaps. And that, I think, putting that investment there and being very clear about that, I've been really proud to be a 3Mer. And on top of that, I think that there's been transparency about the data that we have of our own corporate structure, and publishing our data in terms of what our diversity and inclusion numbers look like to the public. And what that says to me is that there is a commitment to make a change. There's a commitment to transparency, and that's what we need. And I think that there is also the commitment to be held accountable because of that public publishing of the data. So I think companies have the responsibility, but I will say that I see the stance on social justice as a civic issue, not a political issue. And by that, I mean, there are certain things that as Americans, we all believe in. The right to social justice and eliminating inequities, the right to vote. Those are civic issues. They aren't political issues. And I think oftentimes those lines get blurred and they say that companies are overstepping. But I think companies have a right to play in civic issues, and my company is doing so, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
That's great, and that's a really important distinction to draw. Terry, I want to turn to you as a CEO. What is your philosophy about how the organization communicates and when you take stances and when you're public about your feelings?
Well, I think first I'm going to talk about probably the broader corporate community, because I do think that, for one, it's heartening to actually see that companies now are focusing on issues that are broader than just shareholder return and their financial results. And so I think that's healthy. I think today's consumers expect that. And I think what you're seeing is really a focus on those companies that are purpose driven, not just profit driven. And so to me, I think that's a healthy dynamic in our country. And as a result, I think that, as a social business, and we like to say Thrivent's the original social business, having been in existence since 1902, that I think it's important. The other thing is it's good business too in the long run, to make sure that you're developing and you're creating an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcome. And so at Thrivent, we've had a long-standing focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. My emphasis has really been on inclusion, because I often see that companies embrace diversity, and while you can bring people into the organization, if they leave right away, you've failed. And so to me is, how do you create that open, supporting ecosystem, and so that everyone can bring their full self, their authentic self to work? And so with the events that happened this last year, we first listen. And it's the importance of listening. So we created listening circles and we listened to our employees. Then we actually embarked on a learning campaign. And so that we need to actually learn from each other what their experiences are, what our history is. And then once we've listened and we learn, then we're in a position to act. And so that's what we do at Thrivent is we listen first, we learn, and then we act. And that is serving us well.
Well, on that note, let's talk a little bit about the numbers, the dismal numbers that we heard just a little while ago in the Minnesota Census for Women in Corporate Leadership. BIPOC women holding just 1.6% of executive posts at public companies in Minnesota compared to more than 20% for white women, and similar disparities on board of directors. So what do you think? I realize this is an enormous question, but how do we make serious progress and make sure that the progress isn't just among white women, it is among all women? Leslie, can I have you start?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so those are staggering numbers, and they're numbers that we've seen year after year, and they haven't quite changed yet, right? And so one of the things that I think we have to think about is that it's clearly it's a numbers game. When you start entry level and you look at those numbers, they're a little less staggering, right? But as you start to move and look to go to higher levels, it declines. And I think one of the things we have to think about and we have to do is think about that middle part of a career there. So, we do a great job overall in recruiting and getting talent in and understanding that mix from a talent standpoint. But then after about 5 to 6 years or so, as organizations overall, you start to see that that talent will leave or move or go other places. And I think that's where we have to focus is to what things can we do internally as organizations to be able to pull that talent through beyond that kind of 5-year stance into some of those more senior roles or broader roles overall. And I'd say that's one of the things that our company is looking at and doing is identifying ways that we can have that focus on the underrepresented community and having focused sponsors and focused programs to be able to pull that talent from that area, and we call it like the frozen middle, from that time frame to be able to help get them into some of these senior positions. And I think that's fundamentally what has to happen in order to start to make this progress moving forward.
Right. Remi, does that resonate with you as well?
I first say, this is a systemic issue that we're dealing with. And so I feel like the solution has to be systemic. And what I mean by that is, when I look at companies today, the way we recruit, the way we retain and promote, the way we, look at the board as diverse. All of those things need to be changed systemically. Our processes and our systems for how we attract talent have to fundamentally change. So I think, that's important. I think all of us have a responsibility because we feel it, in our hearts, or we know it's a business imperative in our minds to be unapologetic and relentless in our drive for this. Don't take your foot off the gas, because I think that the conversation is overwhelming and it's a big problem to solve. So it can make us all feel tired. I admit I feel tired, but it is our responsibility to keep going. And I think, we have to make sure, I love what Terry said about inclusive cultures. Once we attract the talent, do they want to be there? Do they feel that even though they're present, are they being fully utilized? Are they really being valued? Are their voices really being heard, and can they have impact? We have a lot of work to do in that space alone as companies to make sure that our diverse talent feels as fully leveraged and fully realized as others. And then I would say that we have to be open to uncomfortable conversations around this topic. It's never fun to have these discussions, and we push people into places that they might be uncomfortable, and that's okay being uncomfortable. I think being comfortable with being uncomfortable is a really important part of solving this. But the data is critical. Make sure you see that data and know where you are. Treat it like a business imperative. When we want to get things done in business, we set a goal and we relentlessly go after it. That's how I think we need to treat this work.
Do you, Terry, Kristen, do you see anything changing? I mean, we've known these numbers. I think we're getting better about talking about them. I have to say, you know, we tried to do a story about why there was such a disparity between white and BIPOC women last year, and we were met with a lot of resistance. People didn't want to talk about it, and I feel like there is more openness now. I think that, so that's a sign of progress. But what do we actually do? I mean, you know, you hear companies say, well, they're just, you know, there weren't any applicants, or, you know, we're struggling to find people. Well, obviously that's not good enough. So what do we actually do? Terry, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you, as Remi said, you have to be relentless in pursuing this. And so, you know, a couple of thoughts there is first, you know, I insist on a diverse slate of qualified candidates. And, you know, I grew up at American Express under Ken Chenault. That's what he asked us as leaders to do, and it works. And so I brought that practice to Thrivent. Guess what? It works. And if people say, you know, oh, I can't find qualified candidates, I say try harder. And it was interesting in Appleton, Wisconsin, you know, I had leaders there tell me, oh no, we just don't, we can't there. I mean, we just don't have people of color here. And I said, look at your demographics. You absolutely do. You need to start hanging out where people are hanging out, and you need to start establishing relationships and building our brand in those communities in order to recruit from those communities. And it does work, but it does take time. I mean, it's not, this is a journey. At Thrivent, we've been on it for, you know, 15 years. I'm very proud of our board. We also have 23 regional boards across the region, where I was fortunate to be the general counsel at the time when they were created. And so I insisted on great diversity. So we find we have great diversity, but it takes tenacity. It takes, you know, it takes drive and commitment and to make it happen. And so you really do need to hold that expectation that this will happen. And it does.
And also it takes not lumping everybody together. We're all right. I mean, we're not all one, you know, minority. Or I mean, I think there was a time where a lot of big companies checked the box by saying, well, we have women, but they weren't really looking at the breakdown within.
Yeah, and I just want to build on the point too that Remi made around it being a systemic issue, and that is fundamentally true, right? And so because of that, it is going to take consistency, tenacity, and time to do that. I think one of the great things though is that we are having these conversations, and we're having them not only in open forums, but we're having them in smaller groups and within our companies, and having consistent ones. We just had one last week with what happened in Minneapolis, and we had the conversations that Friday. And so it was, you know, historically, we probably would have never had those type of conversations. It would have been a really small group that did it, but we had a broader one overall. And I think that's the progress that we have to have, and we have to continue moving forward, where it becomes just the norm and how we are operating on a day-to-day basis versus a special group or a special conversation only in, you know, tragic times.
Right, right. Kristen, anything that you want to add, or things that you think can help to move the needle?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I do think it's getting comfortable being uncomfortable. We have to keep having the dialogue. We have to keep looking at the numbers. We have to keep telling the story. But I think one of the things is we've maybe been a little too patient. I just, sometimes when I read and I see, you know, just looking at the gender wage gap, right, that it will be at parity in 100 years. What business problem have we ever accepted a 100-year solution? I sit on a leadership team, and if they come to me and say, hey, we want to solve this, and I come back and say, oh, in 30 years, we should be able to get to where you want to be, it's not an acceptable answer. So I think we have to keep pushing people to be a little bit more uncomfortable so that we can actually make this change, so that we can make these things happen. And there are absolutely tactical things that we can do. I think there's incredible value in these conversations, in the data. I think sponsorship, you know, the hiring piece, the inclusivity piece is a big thing, but I think the sponsorship piece is, right? If these groups don't have a seat at the table today, who's their voice at the table right now? Who's the one speaking on their behalf before they have that seat at the table? And I think if we can embrace those sponsorship programs, that's one way that we can really truly start to drive and make a difference.
So we've talked about the recruiting and what we need to do. Let's talk a little bit about retention, especially right now, especially in Minnesota. All eyes are on us, and not in the way we would like, not in the way anybody would like. Obviously major issues to discuss as far as policing and governing, and we're not going to get into that right now, but I am curious to all of you. Think about, and especially Remi and Leslie, who moved here from other markets, would you have said yes to a job in the Twin Cities today? And do you think that recent events are going to make it more difficult to recruit professionals to Minnesota and to keep them here? Remi, I see you nodding your head. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting because, you know, no one's posed that question to me. Would I have made the move before? And the answer probably is no, having a 13-year-old son. I fear for him, and that's anywhere in the country, but it has become acutely scary here in Minnesota. And so the only thing that gives me some level of comfort is that my son doesn't drive. He doesn't do many things that are beyond my control. But if he was a driving, you know, person, I would be hyperventilating. That's what I can say on a daily basis. And so I think what is surprising to me as I've learned and grown to love Minnesota is that we are some of the most educated, exposed people in this country, but yet we have racial disparities that, you know, lend to the police brutality that we're seeing. We have the biggest education gap. I could not, or I did not choose to send my son to a public school, which is a shame because for, you know, white boys and girls, public schools are great here, not the same for, you know, Black boys and girls. And I find that to be challenging. The housing gap is huge here in Minnesota. And so we have to look at ourselves and say, why is that? To be an educated, progressive state, why do we have such big disparities? And I think we have to solve those problems, and we have to show that we're acting on those things and we recognize them and we want to be different in order to attract talent. I think it's going to be quite difficult. In fact, my friends are asking me to move away from here, just out of sheer concern and care, to be totally honest. So we do have to be careful because we have some great corporations and companies here that desperately need diverse talent. And so while we can't erase what has happened or what is so, we can move forward to a different future. And so we're going to have to share with that talent what we're doing to change the trajectory.
Yeah. That's hard to hear and important, I think, for everybody to hear. Leslie, what about you? I think you're probably the most recent transplant of the group. What did
Yeah.
you know about Minnesota when you came here, and how has it been for you?
Yeah, so I actually am from Minnesota, so I'm from Minneapolis originally, and it's interesting. I grew up in Minneapolis and went off to college, went to Howard University, yay, Kamala Harris. And when I left to go to college, I didn't plan to come back to Minnesota at all. Like I was definitely going to other places, and I did. I lived a lot of different places before I came back to Minnesota. And I came back for one, family reasons, but then two, the opportunity I had to come to Hormel brought me back to Minnesota. And so we're 90 miles south of the Twin Cities. So we're not in the thick of what is happening in Minneapolis. However, we're completely affected and impacted by that, and also have put into place things to help address some of those opportunities. But I agree with Remi in that what we have to do in order to recruit and retain is to communicate the things that we are doing to help the community moving forward. And so for us, one of the things that we did was we have an IND coalition at Hormel, and we asked that coalition, where should we invest? What organization should we invest in? One of them was Manor, which is minorities in agriculture and natural resources. The other one was the UNCF, and then the last one was the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And so we invested in those organizations. And the reason we invested in those organizations is because we want an ongoing partnership with them. And we want to continue this, not just because of what happened in May last year, but because we want to build the continued support moving forward. At the same time, we also want to support our employees and their children's ability to get education. So we also we've introduced this Pathways program, Inspired Pathways program, that will support, fund community college for all the children of our employees moving forward. And so we see education as one of the great equalizers, and we want to invest in that. And so that's another thing that we're doing, and we have to communicate to the people that we recruit, and then also the people that are here, the types of things that our organization is doing to help support beyond what is happening in the local area day to day. But for sure, it's a battle and it's a challenge, and we will have to continue that communication moving forward.
Kristen, can you hear us? I feel so bad. Kristen is like one of the most AV savvy people and spends all day on Zoom every day. And I feel bad that we're having these issues. We'll get back to her in a minute.
And she actually taught us a trick too on Zoom,
did.
right? So.
She did.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I apologize tremendously. I have done so many of these without issue. And today I keep getting a notification that the meeting is timed out and I get kicked out. I have to reconnect back in. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm certain that it's on my end, but I apologize tremendously. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
This is the new world.
It's very 2021. It's okay. Do you since you're on the front lines of recruiting, I'm curious, Kristen, what you're seeing. I mean, are you hearing people saying, I don't want to come to Minnesota? Has the attitude changed at all? And what do you say?
You know, so it's something that I think about every single day, and I have to thank Remi and Leslie for your candid conversation on this, because it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking to hear that you wouldn't make that move again, right? And it's something that so many people have the privilege without even having to take that into consideration. So I haven't been experiencing that, but on the other side of it, I haven't been asking the question either. So maybe that's something that we, again, need to normalize a little bit more into the conversation. We also have, branch locations across the U.S., so not all of the positions are necessarily in Minneapolis. So I think we've had that luxury where we aren't running into it maybe as much as possible, but maybe that's why we're not getting the diverse pool of candidates that we're looking for. There might be that hesitation, there might be that barrier where people are eliminating themselves from the role, considering it based on our location. So I think it's important that we find ways to be able to address that.
And it does seem like something that the business community as a whole is going to need to address in Minnesota. Terry, any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I think so. I'll point out that one of the things I'm excited about and optimistic about the future is the Alliance of Alliances, newly formed, and I think it's a very different approach to addressing the systemic issues that we find ourselves faced with in this community. And so it's really, putting out front the Black leaders, making sure that there's support. And so oftentimes it feels like the white community would tell the Black community what to do, or it was left to the Black community to figure it out itself. And this is a really different approach where it feels like a true partnership. And I actually think we're going to actually have peer measurement too. And so we'll have goals and we'll see progress. That's really my hope and desire for this community in particular. The other thing, and I'll just speak a little bit at Thrivent, because we have a great workforce, and we call ourselves the Thrivent family. And that's why our listening circles are so important, because, with family, we support one another, we protect one another. And when a member of our family experiences microaggression or experiences discrimination or hate speech or whatever, we rally to our employees and support them, because that is so critically important. And so I want to make sure that each and every employee at Thrivent feels included, they feel like they're supported, and they're a part of our family. And so that means, as executives, we need to know and get to know our workforce, particularly, our Black and our BIPOC employees, to make sure we're asking them, what can we do to support them? How can we make our inclusivity better? And because we can always get better, and we can always create an environment where everyone feels like they can bring their authentic self to work, and we're there for each other.
We're hearing a lot about listening circles at work and outside of work too, because obviously when you move to a market or decide to stay in a city, it's not just work, it's your whole life, as Remi alluded to. And Remi, I want to just take a minute to talk about the courageous conversations that you initiated last summer. I was lucky enough to be invited. You and our mutual friend, Amy Langer, brought together a group of white and Black women to just have a candid, safe place to talk and feel comfortable. Why? What prompted you to? Well, I mean, we know what prompted you to do that, but what made you feel like, I'm going to take this on top of everything else that's going on right now?
Yeah, I think it was really spurred by who I am for many people in their lives. I am many people's few Black friend, I hate to say. And so I think I present myself as someone who you can make that controversial statement, or you might say something that, could be offensive, and you want to try it out with me. I've tried to have the dialogue with many people. And so what I noticed is that dialogue was changing things. They would come into the conversation feeling one way and leave the conversation feeling another way. And so I felt like if one human being could have the opportunity to hear the experience of someone who experienced racism, and you could put a face on it and a person, and it was intimate, that would passionately ignite people to really want to become anti-racist. And that's what I think we need in the world, is anti-racism. And I think it is that human connection that drives that. So many of my friends that know Nolan, who is my 13-year-old son, their level of empathy, because they know Nolan as a Black boy, was way different than those that did not have any Black people in their lives. And so it's so important for us to be able to connect on a human level. And that's what I wanted this group of women to do. And it was just, you know, the conversations that we had and will continue to have, I think will unlock something in each of us, and each of us have a role to play in this community. And if it inspires one small change, that is one small change that makes a difference in Minnesota.
Absolutely. We have so many good questions pouring in. I have more of my own, but I want to make sure that we get to as many as we can. Thank you all for posting them. And I'm going to start taking a few questions from our audience. Janice wants to know, how do you gracefully yet prominently display on your website that you not only welcome, but are also looking to hire BIPOC women? We're working on a website, and this is the ask of the client. They want to say it, but it feels weird to say it. What do you do? Terry, do you have any thoughts?
Well, you know, everyone likes to see themselves. And so I think making sure that you have, you know, an array, you have BIPOC people on your website, and that people can see. I mean, everyone also wants to see themselves in leadership. And so making sure that, you know, you're intentional about your board again, about the C-suite, about, you know, those faces that are leadership on your website.
Great. Leslie, what would your reaction be if you were looking at job listings and something, you know, particularly called out women of color? Would that be a turn off? Or what would you think?
I think I like the approach that Terry just said. I think, you know, seeing faces that look like me would make me say that's a place that I would be interested in. So whether it's on the leadership team, if it's what you're using to highlight on your website, if it's on your board, all of the above would be the best, right? So I think that that's certainly the biggest place. I don't know that a specific call out would necessarily, that might turn me off a bit because it sounds a little too direct. But I think, yeah, certainly having that ability to see, you know, diversity, it goes a long way.
I see Kristen smiling there, and obviously this is close to your daily challenges. What would you add?
I do. I believe, you know, Gina Davis, if she can see it, she can be it. So I think there's an opportunity to show that. I also think providing feedback from individuals, right, from all different walks of individuals, so that they can see themselves and hear their voice, hear it in their voice, whether you're reading it or in their voice, of what it's like to work at the organization.
Mm-hmm. Remi, do you want to add anything?
To say just what Kristen said. I think the best attraction of diverse talent is to have your current diversity speak on your behalf. So.
Mm-hmm. But is that also a big ask? Is that, I mean, we've talked a lot about that this year, that like we shouldn't expect that all of our Black friends are going to explain racism to us, right? It's not your responsibility. Is that okay to ask in a work setting?
It's a good question, Allie. I think there are some things that it's okay if my company expects from me. If I am diverse talent at 3M and I enjoy being at 3M, I'm proud to express that. That doesn't feel like a burden. I think, at least, and I'm, you know, this is an N of one, and Leslie may have different points of view. I think the burden comes when people say, well, what should I do? I don't know what to do. Really, once you've educated yourself, right, just like any other thing in your life, you take action, and you may not know exactly what to do, but move in the way that you think will make a difference. And so I think the burden comes when, you know, people become educated and then they ask you to solve the problem. The oppressed can't solve the problem, you know? So I think that's the key.
Yes.
I want to say preach, but I would definitely say that I think the one thing, so I think for sure it is okay to ask the people of color to represent the company to recruit. I think all of us want to have more people of color in our company. We are at our company for a reason and enjoy it. So why wouldn't we be the ones that help to recruit that? So I don't see that as a burden at all, or I don't see that as an added burden. I sort of see that as our role and what we need to do. If we've had success here, we need to be able to spread that and show that. So I think but I definitely think if you came to me to ask for things that you could Google search or that you could understand first before you come to me, I think that that's a different conversation.
Right. You could read a book, right? Thank you for that perspective. Terry is back in Minneapolis after many years away. Welcome back, Terry, and wants to know, how would you suggest navigating a career search in the current environment? How do you connect with other women leaders and people in the community when, you know, it's a little awkward to ask someone out to coffee even now? Terry, any advice?
You know, leverage your network. I mean, I think, you know, that's even, you know, the previous conversation is we all have networks, and it's amazing how small the world is. And so to me, it's reaching out, it's making that connection, and then it's networking. You know, I think, you know, and I'll maybe go back a little bit to the previous conversation a little bit, is, you know, the power of a company's brand, and the fact that, you know, if you want to become the destination for talent and great talent, you've got to be intentional about your brand. And so that really requires you to network and making sure that you're talking to the community. What is your brand in the marketplace? How do you, you know, how do you actually encourage, and so that you're reaching out and you're developing that brand, that you're a great employer. And so that would be my advice to Terry is, you know, build up that network, make sure you're making those connections. This community is very supportive in networking. And I would say, you know, people are really willing to help. So put yourself out there.
Yeah. Kristen, anything to add?
I think kind of beyond the networking piece of it, events like these, events where you have an opportunity to connect with women in groups, even if it's over video, through chat, and I know mentoring circles and different things that I've been part of, but I love that we have so many events in the Twin Cities here where you're able to participate and be able to meet women across multiple organizations at multiple levels. And so seek those out, take advantage of them, participate in them. And I think that's where you'll quickly build your network and be able to play into what Terry was talking about as well.
We have another question about mentorship and sponsorship, and what are your companies doing? What do you do to facilitate that? Do you connect younger employees with more senior management? Do each of you take it upon yourselves to do that? What can you share? Remi?
3M has some concerted efforts in mentorship, which has been really nice. Really trying to take, you know, mainly women, but also women of color, to make sure that we have the right mentorships. I think sponsorship is a bigger challenge because when I define sponsorship, it is the person that's actually going to give you a job, is going to act on your behalf. And I do not think that we have created systemic ways yet for sponsorship, but I know the company is talking about it because it takes both to be successful. I have to say, once I was educated on the difference between the two roles, and, you know, really understood that there were people that were sponsors of mine speaking in the room when the career decision was being made on my behalf. We all need that, and especially people of color. And so I think when we make a difference there, I think it is really going to lend to the difference in career acceleration and retention and movement for people of color.
Great. Anyone else have thoughts on mentorship or sponsorship in your own career or at your companies currently?
Yeah, I would say so. Similar to Remi, we have a mentorship program that has been going on for a number of years, and I think it's a really solid program that expands across the employee base. We just recently kicked off a program around sponsorship and a focused effort there. And so this is the first year that we're doing that. And so it's too soon to tell just how it's doing, but we certainly enabled it and introduced it to be a systemic program that goes beyond just a year or 2 years moving forward.
Great. Kristen, do you want to add
Allison,
anything? Yeah.
Yeah, if it's okay. I just wanted to add, I think that, at RBC, I'm thrilled. We have multiple mentor programs. We have multiple sponsorship programs. And I think those are things that can really make a difference. I'm incredibly supportive of those and passionate about both of those. One of the things that I love to let people know is you can have mentors outside of formal programs as well, right? I know throughout my career, I had many mentors, and those individuals have no idea that they were my mentor. I actually would just find ways to get into meetings with them or to work on projects with them, to learn from them, even though it wasn't a formal one-on-one mentoring program, but just seeking those people out that I wanted to learn from and find them. So I think as an individual, if you can take advantage of the programs that your organization has, and that's certainly mentorship programs. And then, there are things that you can do on your own if the programs don't exist by seeking out opportunities to be with individuals that you think that you can learn from.
Terry, I know mentorship has been key, and seeing women in the roles that you aspired to has been key in your own career. Are there things you're doing within Thrivent?
I think one of the things we're doing in Thrivent is really a robust talent review, and so we're really getting to know our talent, and so because I think first you've got to know your talent to actually then provide stretch assignments, development opportunities, and really, I mean, I think that's key. I agree with Remi. I mean, sponsorship, I think, has to be really important, and and people can have multiple mentors. I had multiple mentors, but that sponsorship, who's in the room, who's the decision maker that's going to say, give her a chance, I take a chance on her. Let's make sure she's got the support that she needs so that she can develop and grow, but let's take a chance, and that's critically important, I think, for providing opportunities for women.
You all are at large companies. A lot of our viewers today are at smaller companies, privately held companies, and they're wondering, how do you go, any thoughts on how you go about implementing, when you're not a company that's going to be hiring 100 new people this year, or you don't have, the capacity to do some of the things that you can do on a really big global level. How can smaller privately held companies be involved in social and civic discussions going on right now? What would you suggest? Any advice? Terry, anything? It's a tough one.
So I think listening circles and creating that safe environment to have these conversations, it doesn't matter the size of the organization. So I think you can encourage that, and making sure that you're just checking in with people to make sure, how are they feeling, what's going on with their day. Right now in Minneapolis, this is a tense week for us. And so checking in to say, how are you doing? No, I mean, really, how are you doing? You can do that in a big company and a small company.
Right.
Allison, this is Kristen. Can I add one thing to that?
Of course you can.
I'm sorry about that. One of the things that I would say is look at the advantage of being a small company. Sometimes large companies take a lot to move, take a lot to have change. And with a small organization, you can impact change, you can adapt and pivot very quickly. So following on what Terry said, listen to the employees, just find, and it doesn't have to be, if you can get paralyzed by trying to find the perfect solution, but change one thing that will make it better. We say this often, we win it by the ones, because one thing that you get a little bit success breeds more success, and pretty soon it becomes contagious, and you'll have progress faster than you anticipated.
I like that. Good motto. Remi, you were going to add something, I think?
And similar to Kristen, great minds think alike. I think sometimes smaller companies are better examples of what the larger companies are trying to get to. And they tend to be very high touch. As Terry said, from a talent review, they tend to really know their talent well. They tend to bring more of their whole selves to work. And so they can actually be mentors to bigger companies as to what this really looks like when people feel included and their workforce is diverse. So don't be afraid, smaller companies, if you have things that are working well, reach out to us at bigger companies and tell us how it's done, because we need to be agile and we have a lot more complexities, but seeing what that end looks like and seeing how it's demonstrated actively is a help to us. So that was
grass is always greener, right? Work goes both ways. Bonnie asks, is there a way for more women to be invited to difficult conversations? You know, conversations with people of color. She says, I want to hear and learn so I can help my company start these conversations. Any advice? I guess, Remi, we'll start with you, and then Leslie, if you have anything to add.
I think, I guess I would encourage, and, you know, I know this is awkward what I'm going to say, but talk to people that are in your network that have this experience. You would be surprised. Like, you know, I know that there's conflicting direction. Don't bog down your Black counterparts. Don't ask them a lot of questions. I think we're open to questions that are born out of you've educated yourself and you just want to hear our experiences. I think most of us are open to share. And so I would say, number one, don't be afraid to reach out to someone in your network to try to seek to understand. But number two, I would say this, you know, similar to what Leslie said, if you Google and if you really go to school, there are so many experiences out there that are just free to you. There's so much information, like nothing I'm saying is really new. I wish I was that special, but I'm not. And so you can really learn about those experiences by saying, now I've read, I understand the systemic issue. Now I want to hear human experiences, and go out there and look at that, and they're readily available for you.
Right. Leslie, anything to add?
No, I would wholeheartedly agree with that and say that don't be afraid, to reach out with those questions to start the conversation, because I think that that's the important piece too, is you want to hear the human side of it and experience of it, and there may be specific questions that you just can't get from reading a book or reading an article, that you want to just understand the experience. And so I think I agree that I wholeheartedly, if anyone reached out to me and asked questions, I'm happy to answer those questions about that. And so don't be afraid to do that.
That's how I got to meet you, Leslie, right? I just kind of stalked you on the internet, let's be honest. I had gotten a notification from Hormel about a promotion. I thought you looked really interesting. I wanted to talk to you, and so I tracked you down through LinkedIn. Didn't go through PR, much to their chagrin, and look at us now.
Yep, so that's proof.
Exactly. Kristen, before we do one last question?
I think they've said it so well. I don't really have anything more to add on that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were giving you
I
ample time.
appreciate it.
So I've got one more fun question from the audience, well, on a light note, and then one final question before we wrap up. And thank you all so much for your time, and thanks to everyone who has been spending this time with us today and for all the thoughtful questions. This question is, what is the line between personal and professional in the post-COVID workplace? Like, are children and pets always going to be with us in meetings from now on? Will we get back to a more formal place? Do you want to, what do you see post-COVID for the workplace? Terry?
Well, I'm smiling because, we don't have pets. And so one of the big joys of my day is when a pet comes into the room and I feel like I can at least, have a little pet fun. Or when little kids are running through, it reminds me of, years ago when my kids were small. So I hope that this becomes a part of the workplace because it makes us all real and human. And so it's been fun. I do think, we were just talking and laughing about this morning because, at some point in time, we are going to go back to the office. I do think that flexibility is going to be critical to make sure you attract the talent and retain the talent. And I think we've proven that we can be productive. And so I do think flexibility is going to be a part of it. But at Thrivent, we're worried about burnout. And so we've introduced the 2-hour block on Monday morning where, it's no meetings, it's to prepare for your week. Because what we were finding is everyone started preparing for their week on Sundays. And I'm like going, you've got to have Saturday and Sunday. So 8 to 10 Monday, it's prepare for your week. And we're firm about lunch hour. I'm violating that rule today, by the way. But noon to 1 is really important. And then on Fridays, we're gonna it's basically no camera Fridays. And the rationale for that is because I am on my treadmill. And I just like one day where I could just, have my hair in a ponytail and keep my Lululemons on and maybe be a little sweaty and not turn on the camera. So that's what we're doing on Fridays. And yet we were laughing. Okay, well, we're probably not going to have, ponytails and Lululemon in the office when we go back to the office. And so I think we'll have to navigate that. But I do think flexibility is here. And the fact that we're getting to know people's families and their pets. I know some of their pets by name and it's fun. They know my voice. And so they even jump up on the chairs and say hi to me now. So it's been fun and it's real.
That's great. I love that. I love that no meetings on Monday mornings. That's a great one. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be stealing that from you now. One final question from me. When you think, we've had so much disruption, we've had so much heartbreak and so many difficult issues. I think all of us have kind of had to, take a pause, examine our careers, examine what's really important. What goals have each of you set for yourself? Is there something, a goal, personal or professional, that you've set? And also, what would you challenge to the business community? Maybe not just your own company, but is there a goal or a challenge that you would issue to the business community at large? Leslie, do you want to start? Personal and professional?
Yeah, I'll start. So personal goals that I've set for the next year or so is really around having that impact in the community. So taking the impact that I have and developed within my company and expanding that and having an impact in the community is certainly a goal that I have moving forward. And the challenge that I would issue to the business community is that be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So we saw the staggering results or the numbers on women and people of color in executive positions. And as we stated before, it's not new, it hasn't changed. But what can you do as a company to change that? What are your commitment to change that and make that no longer the reality?
Great. Remi, what about you?
Well, I'm going to look like I'm piggybacking on Leslie, but I too have a goal to just have bigger and more impact in the community, and to give of my skill sets, to give of who I am more, so that I can help anyone that that my skills can help. And so that's important. And then for the business, I think that we are on the right path in terms of the reckoning that has happened, the goals that we have set. I think I challenge the businesses to look at unraveling the systemic processes and reward systems that are holding us back. Because I think that we have set goals, but sometimes I think we haven't recognized what's really getting in the way. And so if we unravel this systemically, really relooking at our processes for recruiting, our processes for promoting, I think that we will make a difference. But if we just keep it on the surface of we want to accomplish these goals and we don't really do the work on the systems so that it's consistent and sustainable, I think we'll be right back here. We'll make a little bit of progress and we'll roll right back in a couple of years.
I hope not. I want to be having a different conversation a year from now. Wouldn't that be great? Kristen, what would you add?
So the one thing I would add here, the goal for myself is to be a good role model of what I've learned, like from Terry's example, that it's okay to have a day where I choose to work remotely and I can't put my hair in a ponytail anymore. I did the COVID cut, but to wear, yoga pants and be off camera if necessary. But I think it really comes down to that's just challenging the organizations as a whole. It's not returning to what it was. It's taking the best of what we've learned in this environment, some of the flexibility, allowing people to bring their whole selves to work, getting comfortable with having those uncomfortable conversations, recognizing the need and understanding that there is potential burnout. I have no meeting mornings with my management team too. We block up Wednesday mornings just to allow people to just some time so that you can hear yourself think, so that you aren't spending your weekends preparing for the week or knowing that you've got to get things done over the weekend, but challenging us to learn the best of what took place during this time, this pandemic, and bringing that into establishing a better workplace, a better work environment, a more inclusive work environment, a more aware work environment going forward.
I love it. And Terry, we'll let you have the last word.
Well, thanks. The goal that I've set for myself is really to continue to listen and learn and then respond. And it's served us well this year as we've equipped our workforce to really work very successfully in this environment. It's worked for us as we really responded to the racial inequity in our country and listening to our workforce. And so to me, I'm committed to continuing to listen, learn, and then respond. And much like Remi said, and Leslie has said too, I think what I'd ask of the business community is look deep inside your organizations. There is systems that are present in, I think, each and every one of our companies that we have to change. I have often said, and Kristen and I are kind of in the same business, but in financial services and in particular in insurance, the way that we recruit our front line, it was designed by white men for white men in the 1950s. It doesn't work for women and the BIPOC community. So what are we doing to actually change it? And so women in the BIPOC community can be successful or as successful as white men. And so those are the kinds of things that I would ask the business community is look deep inside your organizations. It's embedded, it's institutionalized, but until you actually find it and address it, it will just perpetuate itself.
Right. Thank you all so much. Thank you for being so candid and open and knowledgeable and sharing all of your wisdom with us today. A lot of great takeaways from this wonderful conversation. Terry, Leslie, Remi, Kristen, thank you a million for your time. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us today. We want to thank our sponsor. We want to thank St. Catherine University and all of our sponsors, RBC Wealth Management, PNC Bank, Cargill, Salo, and to our video production partner, Studio 120. This webinar will be available online in the next few days, and we'll send you all a link so that you can relive the highlights and share it with your colleagues and friends. Thanks to all for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.